Hey, everybody, how are you doing? My name is Gregg Bossen, and before we go any further, this is not your typical webinar, okay? We are going to run for probably 75 minutes or so. Even though it's free, we're getting into the nitty-gritty. This is no sales. This is hardcore learning, all right? We're also going to take a break after about 40 minutes because you can't sit in front of a computer and listen to me babble for 75 minutes, okay? So that's another thing we're going to do. So do not get on your phone. Do not be in Facebook. Do not be in email. Do not be in the Twitter land or texting. Don't even go to the bathroom. Don't even breathe, okay? Just sit here and learn, okay? So what we're going to be talking about is QuickBooks and Bloomerang. Now, a little bit about me real quick. Let me just click on my little slide. I'm sure I have a little intro. So I'm Gregg Bossen. I'm a CPA with a practice in Atlanta, Georgia. I specialize in nonprofits. I have, I don't know, between the audits of nonprofits I do, between the bookkeeping we do, between the 990s we do, and all of the training I do all around the country, I probably touch around 3,000 to 4,000 nonprofits a year, okay? So we have an accounting firm, but I also own QuickBooks Made Easy for Nonprofits. And all we do is teach people how to use QuickBooks, all right? If they are a nonprofit. We actually have a little website. I'll show you that in a little bit. And we have training products. We also have webinars coming up, but I don't want to waste your time with that because you need to see if I'm any good before you sign up for an actual webinar. Now, again, QuickBooks Made Easy, and I should go ahead and show you the website here. This is our website, QuickBooks Made Easy. And if you have a chance, go to the site. This is where you'll go to buy the products and sign up for the webinars. But all we do is teach people how to use QuickBooks. We also have other services that we offer, but enough about that. I don't want this to feel salesy. I want to get into the meat. Okay, we've got some coupons here, but we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so this is what we're covering. Okay, we are going to talk real quickly, just about 2 minutes, why sync Bloomerang with QuickBooks. And then we're going to look at which QuickBooks product does Bloomerang sync to. Then we're going to get QuickBooks ready. And that's what we're going to be spending about 45 minutes, because if you decide that you want to take Bloomerang and you want to connect it with QuickBooks, you probably need to make sure your QuickBooks is ready to receive the transactions properly, okay? So you got to look at a little setup in QuickBooks. So you can't just go in and say, well, here's how you map. No, you have to look at QuickBooks, understand how it works, then you can do the mapping. So that's what we're going to cover, basically how donations and how income gets entered in QuickBooks properly so that the sync works, okay? So we're going to really get into QuickBooks here, getting the list set up correctly, entering income, all that kind of stuff. That's going to take about 45 minutes. Then we're going to take a break. You'll go to the bathroom or do whatever. Then you're going to come back. I'm going to turn it over to Cody. And Cody is like the QuickBooks sync guru at Bloomerang. He also happens to be really cool. And so cooler than me, I'm quite sure of that. But anyway, so we're going to set up the sync, walk through it with an actual data file, the one I'll be teaching with for the first 45 minutes. And then we're going to sync the transactions. You're going to see how it works, okay? And then we'll end by talking about some sync issues, okay? So that's kind of little problems that come up and how to resolve them. So that's what the agenda is for today. I have a poll before we get started. You know, I told you, Diane, I could do my own polls, but apparently I don't have access to them. I don't. So can you either give me access or just run the poll that asks them how much, there's a question about QuickBooks, like how much, there you are. There you are. Do you have anything to do with the accounting or bookkeeping function? I need you to answer this question because I know you guys, a lot of you came from Bloomerang. You may not do anything with QuickBooks. So either answer not at all, or actually I'm entering some stuff into the accounting system. And if you are, that's probably because you're the one who does everything, right? It's like I'm doing the accounting, I'm doing the Bloomerang, I'm asking for money, I'm sweeping up the floor of the office. Actually, what am I talking about? No one ever goes to the office anymore. Anyway, so all right, this Now, it's always interesting to me, Diana, because what do we have? We have 180 people that have answered, but there's 217. That means there's like 50 people that aren't listening right now. They turned it on, but they're not listening. Why are you not listening? This is really fun. All right. So anyway, go ahead. I'll end the poll. And it looks like 80% of you are in QuickBooks, which makes both Cody and myself happy because at least we're not starting with square one. But the 40 of you that don't do anything in QuickBooks, I'm wondering or in accounting, I'm wondering if there's somebody else in your office that does. Now we have a recording of this, Cody, correct? So yes. So we're going to send that out. So this recording, you should sit down with that person who's doing the bookkeeping because they need to get the QuickBooks set up in order to get the sync right. Okay. So enough of that. All right. So if there is nothing else that I need to say right now, then I am going to get started. Is there anybody that has a burning question or comment before we get moving here? All right. Well, somebody tell me to rock and roll. Put it in the chat, and I won't start until somebody tells me to, because this way I keep y'all interested. Does anybody want me to start teaching yet, or shall we just shit here? Okay, here we go. All right. I accidentally cussed there. All right. We move this back over here, and we are going to get started. And we're about 30 minutes from a break. Isn't that great? So, all right. Why sync with QuickBooks? This is one of those, whatever slides, not really learning very much, but it's fairly obvious why. Because you don't have to double enter, okay? If you're entering stuff in Bloomerang, and then again, you're entering it over in QuickBooks or somebody else's, then you're double entering, okay? So that's a little bit ridiculous. The other thing is, if you're entering it in Bloomerang and then you're entering it again in QuickBooks, I'm an accountant. So I feel like I have to reconcile the two systems next to each other, and because I'm anal retentive, and I won't have to worry about that if we're basically syncing. All right. So which QuickBooks products? Bloomerang syncs, and I put with the US versions, and I don't know, Cody, do you know if it syncs with the Canadian version?
It does not sync with the Canadian version. There is unfortunately a blocker about one specific field that is required for Canadian ones that we can't test because we don't have access to that data.
Okay.
So unfortunately not. That's the short answer.
Okay. So A, he answered the question, and B, you can tell the dude knows what he's talking about, right? So put it in the chat. Don't you think this guy knows what's up? So he's going to be able to help us out here. All right. So it syncs with QuickBooks Online Essentials and Online Plus and Online Advanced. Now, if you have QuickBooks Online, your version looks like this or something like it. It might look like this, okay? And this is what we're going to be teaching, okay? If for some reason you have the desktop version of QuickBooks, that means that your version looks more like this over here, this version over here. And if this is what your version looks like, then you're not really going to get a whole lot out of this particular webinar, okay? I'm just going to tell you that because, well, I do think that Bloomerang does sync with the desktop version, but it's pretty funky. There's an import you have to do. Did you want to make one statement about it, Cody, and then we won't speak about it again?
Yeah, so and you'll get into this in a minute, but our desktop version is a different type of entry than the online version that we're going to be going through today. But we do have a desktop integration. It's just not going to be really covered in this webinar.
Well, Nancy, I see you have desktop, so does Robert. Go ahead and hang out because I'm going to explain to you how to set things up so that you can receive transactions. So the first 45 minutes is going to work for you guys that use desktop. It's just the last little bit when we actually do the sync, it's not going to work. But the other reason why I want you to watch is so you're going to learn something anyway about QuickBooks. So just hang for those of you that use desktop, okay? All right. Macy says, I'd love to know how this happens in terms of having our bank account also synced with QuickBooks. Then it double enters Bloomerang and our bank account. I hope it makes sense. Macy, I'm going to teach that. It does not double enter. Once you download from Bloomerang or sync from Bloomerang, you can actually match deposits from your bank feed so that it won't double enter it. And I have an example showing that exact thing. So Macy, you're going to be fine. All right, let's move. All right. Okay. I'm going to ask you guys to not ask questions for just a few minutes because I'm the only one that can answer them. And we've got 222 people on the call. And I'll just hang for a few minutes and watch very carefully because this is the most important part of the webinar. Okay. Understanding income in QuickBooks and setting up your list correctly. So whenever anybody calls me and they say, well, I want to sync Bloomerang with QuickBooks, the first thing I do is I go into QuickBooks. And the first question I ask them is, how do you enter your income? Because that's what's being put in Bloomerang, income, right? Donations, registration fees, ticket sales, whatever. How do you enter that stuff now manually in QuickBooks? And I'm going to tell you that there are not one, not two, but three. There are three ways of entering transactions in QuickBooks that relate to income. One of them is called the lump by category method. And this involves entering your income by using the make deposit window, going here, clicking bank deposits, and entering the deposits here lumped by income account. Additionally, this is also the lump method. Some people that have bank feeds, they'll click on these and they'll enter them lumped by bank account, okay? So that's the lump method. Who does that? Put it in the chat. Who enters their income at this point into QuickBooks by the bank feed or manually in the make deposit window? Put it in the chat. I want to know who's doing that now. Who's doing that now? I want a lot of answers here. Okay. Now, all right. One person says the bank feed does it. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you to look at the screen now and listen very carefully to me because I'm going to say something that's going to be somewhat upsetting, okay? If you decide that you would like Bloomerang to sync with QuickBooks, you will no longer be doing that method. You will no longer be doing that method, okay? So the second method is the individual method. Now, this is what people do if they don't have a CRM like Bloomerang and they want to use QuickBooks as a database. You have Bloomerang, but you still may be doing this, okay? This individual method involves using what's called the sales forms in QuickBooks, okay? And there are two of them that you may be using. One of them is called a sales receipt, and some people enter their donations individually in this form, and other people that do invoicing enter their invoices using this form, okay? Who uses invoices or sales receipts? Who uses invoices or sales receipts? Put it in the chat. Who uses invoices or sales receipts? Okay, so there's a lot of people that do, okay? Now I'm gonna say something right now, and this is a really important thing to say. I'm gonna take a little sip here. You see how I like to go nice and slow? Bloomerang sends transactions to those two sales forms, okay? So if you are used to using the sales receipt and or the invoice and payment, then you're going to be able to very easily understand how this sync works because it's going to send transactions to either a sales receipt or an invoice and payment, and then you'll complete the deposit. If you're not used to doing sales receipts or invoices, and you just go to the make deposit window and you're using the lump method, you're going to learn a lot in the next 20 minutes, okay? If you are using the sales receipt and the invoice, then this will be kind of a refresher for you, okay? So that's the third method, is syncing. The third method is syncing, okay? And any software that syncs, most of them anyway, are going to sync using the sales forms, okay? Yes, Miguel, that's exactly what we're going to do. And Carrie, you're right. That's one thing, and I'll mention it to Cody. If we're sending individual transactions from Bloomerang into QuickBooks, then we're going to have a lot of customers in QuickBooks, aren't we?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, okay, but it's not like there's a limit of the customers that you have. Alma says she thinks this is the most entertaining webinar she's been to. Well, I think I want to end on a high note. So goodbye. We'll see you later. No. All right. So let's move on. So those are the three methods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the rest of my time in QuickBooks explaining to you how to enter income using the sales forms. Okay. Now, the best way to do this is to start with a bank deposit. Most people understand how to do a bank deposit. Okay. Here's where you put the bank account. This is where you put the name of the person. Although if you're entering it lumped, a lot of times people just leave this name blank. Here's where you put the income account that it related to. This particular part of the deposit was an individual contribution. That's pretty easy to understand. This is where we put the payment method. This was a check. This is where we put the check number. This is where we put the dollar amount. It was $100. And if you use the class feature in QuickBooks, nonprofits are supposed to use them to break out things between programs, income, admin, and fundraising. That's a whole other class I teach. But anyway, we'll say this was for the Go Green Guidance Center. That's how you, and then you go on to the second line and you do the next one, then the next one. I think pretty much people understand that, okay? So the same thing happens in a sales receipt. So I want to basically open up another instance of QuickBooks. So I'm going to take my mouse and put it up to the top left here. I'm going to stop for a second. As I'm teaching the topic, I'm going to throw in extra tricks that make QuickBooks easier for you. And that's what I'm doing right at this second. So pay attention. If I want to open up a second instance of QuickBooks so I can see two windows at the same time, I'm going to right click on this file folder tab and click duplicate. At least that's how it is in Google Chrome. It'll open up. Now I have a second instance of QuickBooks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the plus new, and I'm going to click on a sales receipt. Okay. So here's my bank deposit. Here's a sales receipt. So we'll look at the bank deposit again. Look at the fields you fill out. Name of the donor, income account, check number, payment method. Well, there's a check number. There's the payment method. There's class, and there's dollar amount. So it kind of rhymes. You do this. Name of the donor, income account, check number, payment method, class, and amount. If you've never done a sales receipt before, not to worry, it's the same pieces of information. Name of the donor, income account, check number, payment method, class, and amount. It's the same information. The only difference is you'll need to do a separate form for each donation. Whereas in the bank deposit, you just do a separate line for each transaction. Here you do a separate form. And the thing about Bloomerang is you don't have to do the forms because they're going to automatically appear in here for you. Okay, somebody's just going to enter them in Bloomerang, and then somebody, you or somebody else, will sync and they'll appear directly in the sales receipt. But I need you to understand, Sharon, we're getting to that. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to manually enter its transaction on a sales receipt and on an invoice. Okay, and then we're going to go over to the sync after the break. Go over to Bloomerang, and we're going to enter them there and push them over. But first, I want you to see how to do them manually because there's a couple of things I need to teach you. So the way that this would work, if you wanted to use QuickBooks and use the sales form, but you didn't have Bloomerang, then you'd be like, okay, I go to the mailbox, I open up the mailbox, or the mailman comes by and I got a check. I feel like I'm teaching in the 1970s, but nobody pays by check anymore. But anyway, bear with me. So Matthew Bove, They gave me a check, and the check was going to be $25. It's for individual contributions. This is the same information that I'm putting on the make deposit window. It's going for the guidance center. Done. Okay. Now, this check's only $25. Okay. So the thought is that you literally would enter that check for $25 when you got it, not when you went to the bank, but when you got it. Now, let's say this is the only check that you got and it's $25. Okay. What are you going to do? Forget about accounting. Forget about QuickBooks. Just picture yourself getting a check for $25 on a Tuesday afternoon. What are you going to do with that check? Are you going to go running off to the bank with that check? What are you going to do? Are you going to run off to the bank with the check and deposit it all by itself? No. Where are you going to put that check? Literally, you're holding it. Okay. What are you going to do with the check? Put it in a safe. Thank you, Tamara. There's a couple of you that can deposit it immediately from your desk. Jeannie's hold it in a safe. Kim is deposited online. But most of the time, you're probably going to wait till the end of the week, like Cynthia, and you're going to deposit a batch of transactions all at the same time. Okay. So if that's what you're going to do, Julie says she scans it and goes to the bank. Well, if you scan it and it's the only check that you're scanning, then I suppose it's going to hit the bank account immediately. And if that's the case, if when you enter this, if you're going to scan it immediately and it's the only one you're scanning, it's not going to be batched. You click here and you pick the bank account that it goes to. Okay. What that does is it makes the individual contributions income account go up, and it makes the bank account go up, and it records a deposit. But mostly, like Norbert also does weekly deposits. Okay. Susan groups the checks into a batch and then scans them. If that's the case, then if you pick the checking account, QuickBooks would think every single solitary check was its own deposit. And so when you get to the end of the month, what's it going to be really hard to do at the end of the month? What's it going to be really hard to do at the end of the month? If QuickBooks thinks everything was deposited separately, reconcile, because you're going to have 150 deposits in QuickBooks, and you're only going to have 4 deposits on your bank statement. And so instead, what you want to do is you want to pick this account called Undeposited Funds. Now, what the heck is this account? I've never heard of such. What it is, it's an account. It's in your chart of accounts. It's actually an other current asset account. I'm going to go to the chart of accounts here. I'm going to go to the gear. Anytime you want to set anything up or go to a list, usually you go to the gear on the top right to get to it. As opposed to if you want to enter a new transaction, then you go to the plus new. That's how you enter stuff manually. Okay. But anyway, I'm going to go to the gear and I'm going to click on chart of accounts. And you're going to see here is an account. We all have it. It's in all data files. It's called Undeposited Funds. It's an asset account. And what it is the representation of the money waiting to be deposited. It may be money that's in your safe. It may be money that's in your top drawer. It may be money that's just in the air because they paid with a credit card and it hasn't hit the bank yet. All I know is you've got the money, it just ain't in your bank account yet. Okay. So this is an asset. Okay. It's hopefully you lock the drawer. That's why some people put it in the safe. I like to change the name of this account. I'm going to edit this and I'm going to change the name of the account to that money in my top drawer. So people understand what the heck it is. Okay. And what you're supposed to do, you'll see right now the money, the account is at 0, counts at 0 right there. But if I go over to the sales receipt and I say, okay, I want this to go, well, I have to refresh the screen here for the name will change. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and save and new on this one. And I'm going to go over to the chart of accounts and I'm going to refresh the chart of accounts. Now, right now, that money in the drawer is at 0. I'm going to refresh this window, and you're going to see that now that money in the drawer is going to say $25. Okay. So let's go ahead and do another one. Jennifer says we use this. It's a holding account. That's right, Darlene. Yeah, it's a very cool thing. Let's do another one. Okay. So I'm going to do one for, let's do a different person here, Dave. And let's do one for, let's make this one cash. And I'll make this one for individual contributions. And I'll make this one $10. And we'll say that this one is unrestricted. Doesn't have to do with anything in particular. So I like to put it to the fundraising class. So I'm going to go ahead and save and new. We'll go back to the chart of accounts and we'll refresh the screen. And then we'll see that the that money in the drawer is now going to be 35 instead of 25. Okay. So sometimes my undeposited account is negative. Why would that be? Because the date that you recorded the deposit is before the date that you received the payment. There's a date problem. All right. The sales receipt date is on the 1st. The deposit's 2 days earlier, which is crazy, but that's why that happens, David. All right. So let's see what else. Okay, so let's do a couple of more. I'm going to do one for, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to do one for, do another sales receipt. Oh, I'm just right here. Let's do one for $100. And individual contributions, we'll say this is $100. And we will put it, we'll say it's for fundraising, that money in the drawer. I'm going to save and close. Okay, we'll go back over here. And now I'm going to refresh the screen. And now it's 135. Now I kind of cheated, not cheated, but there's a secret that I didn't tell you. So I need to go ahead and tell you that now. When you go to the sales receipt, I think everybody understands how to put a name here, and that names are those are the people that give you your money. They're customers, okay? They're in Bloomerang. They'll get pushed over to QuickBooks. It will look for the same name in QuickBooks so that it doesn't duplicate it. We'll talk about that when we get into the sync. The class, that's where you put program admin or fundraising. That's a class list. If you use it, you put the dollar amount here. This is not very confusing to understand. Put $1,000 here. The product service. This is the thing I wanted to talk about. When you do a deposit, go ahead and duplicate this. When you do a deposit, you tell it what income account the thing is going to go to. Go to a bank deposit. You tell it what income account the thing is going to go to right there. Okay. When you do a sales receipt, there's no place to put an income account. And so people are always like, I'm used to using the make deposit window. Now you want me to use something called a sales receipt or an invoice, and there's no place to put an income account. There isn't, but guess what there is? There's this list in QuickBooks that I haven't talked about yet called the product service list. Those of you in desktop, it's called the items list. And for you, I could talk 2 hours about what product services or what items are, but I'm just going to tell you right now, product service equals your income account. I think I'll say it again. Product service equals your income account. If you're going to sync from Bloomerang, you'll need to use the sales receipts or the invoices. That's what Bloomerang uses. And you'll need to set up product services. When you set up a product service, it points to, it's associated with, it's connected to an income account. Okay. So for every single income account that you have in QuickBooks, you'll need to set up a product service that points to it. Okay. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to go into your product service list. Well, you know, actually, the first thing you would probably do is look at your chart of accounts, and you would look at your income accounts. And you say, okay, here's my income accounts. Here's one for individual contributions. Here's one for corporate grants, blah, blah, blah. Here's individual contributions. Okay, I need to set up a product service for it. So I'm going to go to the gear. I'm going to go to products and services. Remember, I told you the gear is where you go to usually set up things. Products and services. I'm going to go to new. I'm going to click service, make all your products and services the service type. Don't ask me why, just do it, okay? I'm going to make one called individual contributions. Now, I don't have to make it the same name as the account that it's pointing to. I just am doing it to make it a little bit easier to understand. But down here where it says income account right here, this is where you point it to the income account, individual contributions. And I think I can just start typing it. There it is, individual contributions. So basically, what happens is when you use individual contributions on a sales receipt or an invoice, you use that product service, QuickBooks goes, oh, okay, you must want it to go to the individual contributions income account. So see, on a make deposit window, you put the income account. On a sales receipt, either you or Bloomerang puts it to a product service that points to the income account. Now, you might be saying to me, well, this is real stupid. Why can't I put an income account on a sales receipt? Well, I will tell you why, okay? The reason why is because they weren't thinking of us nonprofits when they created all of this. This is a sales receipt. Forget about accounting, forget about work, forget about everything. It's the weekend and you're out. Where do you get a sales receipt? Put it in the chat. Where do you get a sales receipt? Somebody put it in the chat. Forget about accounting. When does somebody give you a receipt? At a store, when you buy something, exactly. Now, when you go to Walmart and you buy a bunch of stuff and you get the sales receipt, does it have the general ledger income account on Walmart's financial statements on that sales receipt? No. What's on the sales receipt that you get when you buy stuff? What is the listing of stuff on the sales receipt? What is it? Put it in the chat. What you bought. This wine. She said wine. Yeah, it's the things that you bought, the products or services that you bought. The items that you bought, that's what it's called in desktop. The products or services that you bought, that's what it's called in the online edition, okay? And so what QuickBooks does, see, people use this as a cash register. If you ever like in Savannah, Georgia or something, you go to some old antique store and they buy something, they print out a sales receipt and give it to you right out of QuickBooks. And so therefore, in QuickBooks, if Target or Walmart used QuickBooks, they'd have 10,000 product services that all point to the same income account, okay? So that's what a product service is. So you'll need to create those here. Individual contributions, $1,000. That's how that works, okay? So if you're gonna use QuickBooks or Bloomerang and sync to QuickBooks, you'll need to create product services for each one of your income accounts. And then you're going to need to map those product services to a field over in Bloomerang, which we're going to do after the break. Okay. Now there's one more thing we're going to do. I'm going to leave without saving. If you do invoicing, some people do invoicing. Most people don't that are nonprofits, but some people actually invoice. And if you do that, maybe you do it for pledges. You use the same product service on the invoice. Okay. So I'm going to just create an invoice here for, let's see, individual contributions. Let's say somebody gave me a pledge of $3,000. And then this was not restricted. So I'm going to put it to the fundraising class, but it uses the same product service. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. And then when money comes in, when you get a payment against that pledge, you'll go to plus new and you click receive payment. And then I'll put the name of the customer, which of course I can't remember who the customer was. Can somebody tell me what customer I used? I can't remember. Is anybody paying any attention now? We're about ready for a break. Thank you. It was Sherry. Thank you. All right. So there's $3,000. Okay. So let's say she made the payment. Let's say that she made the payment with a check. Actually, you know what? Let's say she made the payment with a credit card. Okay. And it's not going to be in the bank, but it is going in that top drawer. Now, it's not really going in the top drawer, but that's where you want to throw stuff when it's in transit. Okay. So I'm going to click that. And she'll say she paid the $3,000, amount received, $3,000. And I'm going to save and close. So entering that invoice, entering that payment, and entering all of those sales receipts that we did manually, you will not have to do that anymore. All of that's going to be done for you when you sync it over from QuickBooks, okay? So the way that this is going to work, let me go into here and you'll see how this works. The way this is going to work is the income is going to go into Bloomerang. You'll either enter it manually in Bloomerang or it'll come from a web page. Somebody made a donation online. You'll sync it into QuickBooks. It's going to create either an invoice and a payment, or it's going to create a sales receipt. You can set that up however you want it to go. They're going to be pointed to undeposited funds. And then later on, you will record the batch deposit in QuickBooks. And I'm going to do that now. So right now, I'm going to go to a balance sheet. I'm going to pull up a balance sheet. And when I look at a balance sheet, you're going to see that that money in the drawer, let me change it to all dates. Okay. So that money in the drawer has $3,135 in it. So this is money waiting to be deposited. Some of it's in my drawer, some of it's just in transit. I'm going to go to new, and there's two ways that you can record the deposit. One way is manual. I'm going to click bank deposit, and I'm simply going to check off. See, look, all the stuff that's sitting here waiting to be deposited will appear. So this was a credit card, so that's probably not in my drawer. But the way it literally works is the end of the week, you open up the drawer, open up the safe, you get all the checks and cash out. And if there is something that is on this screen that's not in that drawer or safe, somebody's stolen something from you during the week. So that's why I really like using these sales receipts and pointing it to undeposited funds, because if you enter it as soon as you get it, it's kind of like a check and balance, like an internal control. So I'm going to check off all three of these. Okay. And so now my deposit is $135, and this is the bank account I'm going to deposit to. Now I want you to I'll look at the chart of accounts. Right now, there is $51,864 in the bank, and that money in the drawer, there's this $135. Well, actually, I need to refresh the screen because it probably has the 3,000 in it now too. Let me refresh the screen here. Okay, so there's 51,864 and there's 3,135 in the drawer. I'm going to go ahead and make the deposit, save and close. And now, if you go back over to the chart of accounts and refresh the screen, you're going to see that that money in the drawer is only going to be 3,000, and then the bank account's gone up. Okay. Now, Jeff and whoever was before them, Vicky, here comes the fees. Okay. So I'm going to go over to plus new, because that other thing was the credit card. I'm going to click bank deposit. Here's the 3,000. So the main point I want to make is if somebody gives you $3,000, they gave you $3,000. They didn't give you $2,972.15. They gave you $3,000. That's the amount of the donation. So I'm going to check this box because that's what needs to come over, the gross. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to manually enter the fee down here. credit card merchant fee minus $78.62, whatever it is. I'll put this to the admin class so that the actual deposit is $29.2138. Okay. So Vicky, did that answer your question? Put something in here. I want to make sure everybody got their question answered about that. Does that make sense? That's where it should go. I see so many people when they record credit card donations, they just record it net, and then you never know what your fees are. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click save and close on this. I'm going to go back over here to the chart of accounts list. Where's the chart of accounts list? There we go. And then you'll see that money in the drawer is now back at zero. And now if you go to the bank account, it's $54,920. Okay. Is it the same if it's a batch amount? What is this? You can't match the Bloomerang entries with the bank fees, not manual. Any way to, okay. So people are wanting to know if you can sync the credit card fees or do you have to manually enter it each time? And at this point, you're going to have to manually enter it when you make the deposit. There's not a way to sync the fees, but I'm going to take just a second. And I want to show you one thing. Hold on a second here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and play this song for you guys because we are at break time now. So we're going to break for about 5 minutes. And when we come back from the break, then we're going to finish the sync. Okay. We'll do the bank fee, Wilma, when we get back from the break. But at this point, it's time to chill. So enjoy. All right. And we are back. I want one word from each one of you. Put it in the chat about how you are feeling right now. One word about how you are feeling right now. Happy, sad, excited. There's an overwhelm. There's always an overwhelm. Yeah, tired, pumped, good. Yeah, hey man, be honest. Be honest. Anxious? Anyone anxious? I always have anxiety. Anyone anxious there? All right. Now, I'm about to turn it over to Cody, but I just want to review a couple of things. Probably the most important slide, and it's a really basic slide, is this slide right here. Challenge, Debbie says, yes. And because this slide basically covers what happens. Income goes into Bloomerang. You enter it, or it gets in from a web page. Then there's a sync option. It creates the sales form. And then you, or whoever the bookkeeper is, finishes up by recording the deposit, okay? Now, I told you that you could record that deposit manually. You can also match it from a bank feed, and we're gonna show you how to do that, okay? So Julie says she's disappointed because you're using the desktop. I think I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to point out one thing. If you go, let me see where this is. Where is my QuickBooks? Here it is. All right. So if you go to QuickBooks Made Easy and you go to courses and training and you go to webinars, you will see that we have a 3-day webinar series that's coming up for the desktop on May 24th, 25th, and 26th. And we have one for the online edition that starts May 31st. It's 2 hours a day for 3 days, and it teaches you every single thing you need to know about QuickBooks Online, and then everything you need to know about QuickBooks Desktop. If you click on it, and you can look at all the different topics that we're covering, it gives you everything you need to know. And it's 2 hours a day. It's fun. It's like this. It's normally $2.99, and we are going to give you a discount of, let me see where it is. There it is. We're giving you a discount of $40. The discount is Bloom 40. So write that down, BLOOM 40. It will give you a $40 discount. So it's only $259 for 3 days. You'll need to sign up before Saturday night. Well, actually on Saturday night. And Christy wants us to put the little bit.ly in there so we can sign up for it. So Bill, if you could do that for me, I would appreciate it. It covers how to enter payroll if you are not using QuickBooks Payroll. If you're using QuickBooks Payroll, we don't have time to cover all of that. All right, so there are other things that we can give you. We have tech support agreements where you can call us up with questions. If you just click over here and click tech support, and we'll have discounts on that as well that I'll talk about at the end of the webinar. But the main thing I'm interested in is this 3-day webinar series. I think that's probably the best value if you like the way I teach. So I'm going to turn this over now to Cody. Cody, I'm going to have you share your screen, and then we can just kind of walk through the process of how they would sync their Bloomerang. But before they do it, they better have these product services set up. All right. Okay, go ahead, Cody. I'm going to turn it over to you. Do I need to, or are you already sharing your screen?
I am not sharing my screen. I will do that in just a second here.
All right.
While
Cool.
I am doing that, I think Diana has another poll that she wants to share, asking about what accounting software people are using.
Yeah. I can do that one. Whoops, I think I accidentally ended the poll. Can we start the poll again? Hold on, because we were both pushing it at the same time. Okay, there we go. All right, so what is your accounting software? I don't know. Desktop, QuickBooks, online QuickBooks, Xero, Excel, something else. And I think the something else would probably be Sage, Cody. I think that's the other one that people tend to use a lot. I should have put Sage on there, but let's see what we have. Look at all of the people, Cody, that are using QuickBooks Desktop. I got 57 so far. So that's a lot of people that hung out and learned all about how to enter income in QuickBooks. And the sync works the same way. It's going to sync from desktop into QuickBooks using the sales receipt. But I'm going to tell you guys that are using QuickBooks Desktop that you probably want to change to QuickBooks Online. It's where everybody is moving to. In 2022, a version of QuickBooks, QuickBooks Desktop is going to be a subscription-based service, just like the online edition. So the old idea that the reason why I don't want to change to the online edition is because it's really expensive. It's going to be, first of all, the same amount of money, but second of all, it's actually much cheaper, because if you go to TechSoup.org, you can buy the online edition of QuickBooks for $75 for an entire year, not month, an entire year. You heard me right. So think about changing to QuickBooks Online. But I'm going to go ahead and end the poll here. But it looks like we got 100 people on QuickBooks Online, Cody.
Great.
So, and 63 on desktop. So you got a lot of people in Bloomerang land that are still using desktop. So here we go.
All right. Well, the other thing that's nice about the online version is you're in Atlanta and I'm in Denver, and we can both be in the same file here. So I can show what we're doing, which is nice. So this is going to be kind of like the tale of two halves of a presentation, because Greg really brought the energy, and I'm like the post-lunch nap, because I can't possibly keep that level of energy up. I can get in close with the really important stuff though, just like you do. Well, thank you for that introduction. That is really, really helpful, because I am the product manager who initially created the QuickBooks Online integration. And one of the biggest challenges that we have had is having our customers understand how the sales receipts work, how the invoices and payments, and how all of that stuff matches up with the service items and getting that reconciliation done. So I really appreciate that introduction. Hopefully that gets a lot of people further down the road, so that when I show this part, it all becomes clear. Really quickly, just some general admin side stuff. if you are trying to set up your QuickBooks Online integration, you have to start off by going to the My Organization section of Bloomerang, come down to the preferences under the accounting integration and select QuickBooks Online. And then when you save that, you will see in your settings area a new card for QuickBooks Online. So when I click into that, you will see I've already got some of this stuff set up. Initially, the first time that you go to set this up, there's going to be a wizard that you go through where you log in and go through some settings. All of those settings are located here. They're just kind of broken up a little bit differently. So we talked about it a little bit. Greg talked about how transactions get brought over. Bloomerang has 3 different types of transactions that would be going over to QuickBooks. You've got your one-time donations, you've got your recurring donations, and then you've got your pledges and your pledge payments. You can select kind of as a blanket option that they all come over as invoices and payments. So a donation would go over as an invoice with an immediate payment on that invoice. A pledge would be started with the invoice, and then any payment on that pledge would pay down that invoice. And then recurring donation payments, because there's no amount that we know to enter in as an invoice, recurring donation payments are treated similarly to one-time donations, where they would be an invoice and payment. Or you could do it as a sales receipt. The only caveat with the sales receipt is if you are doing sales receipts for pledges, there is no way to represent the pledge amount, what that person is committed to paying. So you are not going to be able to see the total amount of the pledge when it comes over as a sales receipt. You'll just see the payments entered in as sales receipts. So you can see.
Let me interrupt just for one quick second, just to make sure. So what he's talking about here is basically, do you want your pledges to show up in QuickBooks? You know, because if you do, then then under pledges, you would click pledges and pledge payments, which is that second option down there. Then you could look at your balance sheet and your P&L, and your P&L would have all the revenue pledged even before it's been received, if it's accrual basis. If that's what you want, that's what you'll pick. If you do not want that, then you would pick the second option under pledges. It says pledge payments entered as sales receipts. And then what happens is anytime anybody gives you money, that's when it shows up as revenue. It's not going to record when they said they would pay you, just when they actually did. That's cash basis. Okay. So it's up to you. My guess, most people are going to pick the second option, pledge payments as sales receipts, but I wanted to show you that you can do the first option and then have accrual basis statements in QuickBooks. Great. Okay, I'm sorry, go on.
No, that's an excellent clarification. So if you just want all of them to be entered in as sales receipts, you don't want to have that invoice represented with pledges, you can just select it as a blanket option where all the transactions come in as sales receipts or as invoices and payments if you want, or you can select among those 3 how you want them to come over. There are a couple other options. Pledge write-offs. Again, that would probably be only if you have the pledge come in as an invoice. Those would be recorded as a credit memo, which I'm starting to get out of my lane really quickly, but Greg could confirm that represents a bad debt. So if they decide not to pay you, you want to represent that as kind of like a bad debt. So it's a credit memo. We also have the ability to sync the refunds over. If somebody, if you enter in a $100 donation and they want that refunded, we can also send over a refund receipt to offset what has already been synced over to QuickBooks.
Mm-hmm.
Go
ahead.
The last thing worth mentioning is QuickBooks has display name, and display name is kind of the unique thing that's associated with the customer accounts. So you should probably identify the way that you want your donors to come over as customers, your constituents in Bloomerang, to represent the customer accounts that are created, or they might link up if there is an existing customer account that has the same exact name and the same email address. If we find the same email and the same name, we will automatically consider that a duplicate and connect your constituent to that account. Otherwise, we will create a new one. And we can talk about how to resolve any other duplicates that come in a little bit later. So once you get through those settings, the last thing that you have to do is you have to set up a default mapping. You can see here down at the bottom, we've got the default mapping. We've already got the information updated. So it says that money in my top drawer. We sync this information from your lists over every time you load this page. So if you change a value, we will represent that here. So it's always connected and always up to date. The most important thing that you have to do is set up a default mapping. These individual rules are how you would customize it for your specific fundraising efforts. And you must have an account. Now the account kind of maps to that deposit to field that Greg showed when he was entering in like the sales receipt. And then you've got the ability to click the service item, which was that income account connection. And then for people who also use class, we give you the option to set the class.
So I'm going to just to clarify again, if you point at that account, this is one of the main problems that they're having when people try and sync with Bloomerang. That default mapping, that word account, you're going to think that it's the income account. But as we now understand, the income account is determined by the service item, which is over there on the left, that individual contributions, because that points to the individual contributions income account. And that's what we've decided the default is. And what that means is if there are, without any rules, that's what the default mapping is going to be. What does that account mean on the right? That's the bank account. That's what they're asking. And it's not going to a bank account yet. We want it to go to undeposited funds. All right. So that's what that is. Okay. Now, somebody did ask Cody, and then I'll let you continue. I just want to make sure this is a one-way sync, correct? It doesn't, their transactions don't go back from QuickBooks back into
That's correct.
Bloomerang.
Yes, it is a one-way sync. We wanted to make this as easy as possible for your fundraising accounts. We want Bloomerang to be your source of truth because we provide some additional services around your fundraising efforts. So the fundraising stuff you enter in here, and we want to allow that to sync over. And we put in some protections to make sure that that information stays consistent. But when you start going back and forth, you might have people entering stuff on a QuickBooks side, and it's syncing back and forth. Having that information up to date and simplified, we thought that a one-way sync would be the best option for this approach.
So what that means is that what you want to do is you want to set a policy that income starts in Bloomerang. You don't want to have this thing where sometimes it's in QuickBooks and sometimes it's no. Everything starts in Bloomerang, period. So if somebody else is doing Bloomerang and you're doing QuickBooks, then you will not be entering sales receipts and invoices in QuickBooks. You'll be waiting for them to come over from Bloomerang. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And did you cover the rules? Because I just want to make sure, because this is probably the most confusing part. And I want to spend at least a couple of minutes on maybe one of the basic rules.
Yeah. So so the default mapping when you're first setting this up is the only thing that you have to do. The rest of these are all individual and can be added after you finish the setup. Since we've already got this set so that we can show the sync demo, these are here. But I did want to mention, somebody said something about using locations. We do not have locations built into our integration at this time. It is something that I am actively looking into, so I can't announce anything, but please stay tuned and stay patient, and hopefully there will be something available for that at some point soon.
Okay.
So manual rules. There are 3 rules that you enter in here. If you want to enter one more, you can add a rule. So you've got your fund campaign appeal, the transaction type, and the method. All of these are and filters. So all of the items that you put in here have to hit for a transaction to fall under this rule itself. Once you have those set up and you've synced it over, and you've got your list of rules. The important thing to remember, think of this like a coin sorter. So you drop your coins in the top, it hits the first thing that it matches to, and that's the rule that gets applied. So if you have an in-kind gift that is also an individual donation, if it hits this one first and it matches all the criteria, that is the rule that gets applied. Otherwise, it goes to the next one. And eventually, if it goes through all the rules and none of them hit, that's where the default mapping, the default rule comes into play. So it's your catch-all. It's the last one. So you can either sync those over, or there's also the option of setting something to do not sync. And that's what I set up here with the in-kind gifts. QuickBooks doesn't allow you to enter a $0 sales receipt or a $0 payment. So we just set a lot of times in-kind gifts. You have a $0 amount because you don't represent the cash value in the amount field. So I usually just set up a do not sync entry for in-kind gifts just as a default.
I'm going to stop real quick because I just want to say something. If I was listening right now, as y'all are, we still got over 180 people on the call. I'm sure the desktop people kind of signed out. But if I was listening and I was a little confused now, which I probably would be because I've never seen this screen, I might think, well, let me just do the default mapping and I won't worry about the rules because the rules are optional. They're not optional for you, okay? If you just did the default mapping, then every single solitary transaction that came in from Bloomerang would go to individual contributions, okay, and the fundraising class. Now, if that's you, then that's fine, but it usually isn't, okay? So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to probably set up a rule for each one of those product services that you have, because each one of those product services points to a separate income account. So you're probably going to need to set up a rule for each one of those product services. All right. And go ahead and go to the individual donations rule number 3. So see, go ahead with the criteria because you were describing the criteria. These are fields that you can pick when you're in the middle of entering the donations, correct?
Correct. So
okay,
for any Bloomerang customer, hopefully that would be a majority of the people on this call, every transaction has to have certain required fields. The fund is a required field. Campaign and appeal, those are optional. Obviously, it will be a type of donation. And then, of course, the method is also a required field, as well as the date, the amount, and some other ones. So the fund, however, is the only one that's required among the fund, campaign, and appeal. And depending on your complexity, you may want to add additional ones for campaign and appeal. But if you're doing kind of the simple setup that we're doing for this demonstration, you can just have a single fund that maps to that service item. And it just kind of all flows directly in there. It just depends on how your fundraising, the stuff that you associate with your fundraising and the reports that you want to be able to have on the fundraising side, how closely those align with what you need to have synced over from your accounting side and those service item and the accounts that you go into.
So this is the other thing that you would need to do. So you look at your income accounts in QuickBooks. You create product services that point to them. Then you've got to decide which of these fields that he's looking at are the fields that you're going to use to tell it what product service to go to. My suggestion, and this might be not right for you, my suggestion is the fund, because the fund is the only required field, and it's also a required field. The product service is a required field in QuickBooks. And so I'm thinking that you would create a fund or utilize the funds that are already there for each one of your product services. Now, you may say to me, Greg, we use our funds in a completely different way than our product services are set up, which in that case means we're stuck. We need to use one of the other fields. But my first go-to would be fund. But it's something you're going to have to work out. But one way or another, you have to be able to create a rule that ties to each one of those product services so that it'll go into the right place. But anyway, what I did was me and him got on the phone the other day, and we had one for individual donations, and we connected it to individual contributions. And if you go to Rule 2, that's a direct mail, but it, you know, we created a service item called direct mail, which also goes to individual donations over on the QuickBooks side. So we basically have two funds that end up in the same income account in QuickBooks, but they're separated out here in Bloomerang. So you can have like 50 million different rules that all feed into one income account. Okay. Somebody wanted to know how many rules you can have.
There is not a limit to the number of rules that you have. The thing to keep in mind, though, is the more rules that you have, if all of your transactions get caught by, you know, the top 5 or 10 or however many rules, it doesn't matter how many you have underneath there, they're not going to get hit, because it's always the first rule that it matches all the criteria, whether that's just the fund or you have a fund with an appeal because you want them to be separated out by, you know, whether it was a mailed solicitation letter versus a direct call campaign that you were doing for, you know, that specific fundraising effort. You have an unlimited amount, and then whatever is left over once it goes through that list of rules ends up in that default mapping.
But if you had a separate rule, if you had separate funds, if you had a lot of funds and you had a separate rule for each fund, then you would never have a transaction that met more than one rule, would you? So
that would be correct. Yes.
So that
if you mapped everything always to a fund, then yes. And you had a rule for every single fund, then it would never get to the default mapping, because it would always hit one of those rules based on that fund. So it depends on how complex your system is.
And it would only fit one rule. So you would never have to worry about an early rule catching it when you meant it to go to a later rule. So that's something. Can you sync to a batch transaction so you can make changes before moving to undeposited funds? Sync to a batch transactions. I'm not sure what that means, Sharon. Let's finish, Cody. Let's finish this, and then we'll take. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish this. We're close to being done. We're going to show you the sync, and then we're going to like go crazy with answering the questions. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So I want to show two really quick things before we run the sync. The first is you have these reports that you can run, so you can view your unsynced transactions, and what we bring up is where the current transactions that match, you know, the criteria, where they are going based on the existing rules. Now, if you use Bloomerang, you know that this looks like our reporting section. However, because we have to take the rules as they exist in that moment, always run your unsynced report from here. Do not come in here, start adding a whole bunch of different filters and stuff like that. Just go ahead and close it back out. If you change your rules around, come back and run the unsynced from here. Then we also
how do you get there? It's always in settings.
So the unsynced report is always going to be from this drop down. So when you're in your mapping area and you've got your rules set up, if you were to move this one up or down, we save that automatically. When you click to view your unsynced report, we take a snapshot of your existing rules, we check it against all the transactions that are set to sync, and we create that report so that you can see where those transactions are supposed to go.
So in general, I think the safe bet would be, I'm in Bloomerang, I'm ready to do a sync. The safest thing would be go over to the settings on the left, all the way to the left, because that's in settings, right?
Yeah, we're in the QuickBooks settings right now. Yeah. So this is.
But I just want to take them from the beginning so that
yeah. So if you're logged in to Bloomerang, you come to your home page and you're like, I need to run my QuickBooks sync. You'd come down to the settings page, you'd open up your QuickBooks card, and you're in the mapping. Click on the view transactions and unsync, and you can kind of pre-audit where they're going. you can view them and see where we are going to send them from a service item class account. In this case, there's an in-kind gift, so you can see that we're setting that to do not sync. And then the rest are going in based off of the existing rules and where they hit. And then once you actually perform the sync, go ahead and close that out, we'll begin syncing the transactions over.
Do me a favor. Let's go to QuickBooks and show them right before you sync that they're not there. And then we can show them again that they are there. So like if you go to QuickBooks, I think if you just click make deposit or something, click on the make deposit. Yeah. Click make deposit on the right.
Oh, here we go. There we go.
There you go. If you click that, you'll get a window. And there's nothing here ready to deposit. It's just like a blank deposit window. Okay. Right. So now let's close out of that, and then you can go in and do your sync, and then we'll go right back in.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and manually sync. The sync will start. While it's syncing over, there are a few statuses that you would see on a transaction. Unsynced, which means it hasn't gone over to QuickBooks. There's synced. Obviously, that means that it was sent over to QuickBooks at some time. Do not sync. If you chose a rule for it not to sync over, it would have that status. You might see one that says sync in progress, but that only happens during the period of time while a sync is going on. Happens very quickly. You can see it should already be done at this point. So now there's nothing in my unsynced because all, whatever it was, 6 or so of those were synced over. If I open up my synced, you'll now see that it added all of those over and it applied the correct values.
So let's go over to QuickBooks now. And
I don't know if I need to refresh or not, but
I don't think you do. So just go get plus new. Oh, yeah, you can see it in the customer record too, but I just like to click plus new because that's where they'll go. Click deposit. And now they're all going to be sitting there waiting to deposit.
There you go.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just click on one of them. Click on that first one. No, click on that Hermaine Granger. Click on that one. Double click on the name. I think it'll take you over to the transaction. Yeah, leave without saving. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm just trying to highlight a point. We didn't do this sales receipt. Bloomerang did. It's just here, ready to go. And look at the sales receipt number. So Cody, those always have Bloom in the front of them?
Yes, the reason is what we found out is because that has to be a unique number. If we just threw in any number, it might be duplicated by another one in there. So we kept the Bloom value as an append, and then that's connected to the actual transaction ID associated with that entry in Bloomerang. So if you ever need to match up something that's in QuickBooks to the transaction in Bloomerang, you can use that sales receipt number to match it up from running a transaction report in Bloomerang, adding the transaction number column, and you'd be able to immediately see how those two things compare to one another.
So the reason why there's not a class, Terry, is because we didn't map a class rule, which is why there's not a class sitting here. We should have mapped a class rule, but whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I want to do at this point is I want to share my screen, if it's okay with you, because then I can take it through, and then I am going to pop it back over to you.
Let me really quickly, if I could just do one more quick thing. So this transaction that was synced over, one thing that we do is once a transaction syncs or is set to do not sync, we lock down the fields that are associated with that transaction to keep anybody from going in and editing something without also making a specific decision about whether you want those to sync to QuickBooks again. So if there's an error or something like that, and we'll kind of get to that in a minute, understand that we lock those fields down so that there is, again, a source of truth where you make all of your decisions that allow that to sync over.
Okay. Nancy uses funds to track classes. So that means if you want to continue to do that, then you're probably going to need to use one of the other fields to point it to a product service. And then that means since that other field isn't required, you're going to need to make sure that whoever's using Bloomerang puts something in that field. Otherwise, it'll sync to the default option. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click plus new. I'm going to click bank deposit. We're in the same data file. So here they all are. So I'm going to go ahead. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. And I'm getting to the duplication question from Lex. Okay. So first thing, we'll do these two. So this is Lemon and Scott. Now, I know these are checks, but we'll just act like they're credit cards. I'm going to go ahead and click down here, and I'm going to put the credit card fee. Now, how would they easily find out what the credit card fee was? Because we just speak to it, because there's people that are like, dude, I'm using Bloomerang. Y'all know what the credit card fee is. Can't you do this for me? Well, not right now. But basically, you're just going to have to figure out what the difference is, or do you have any thoughts on this about how to figure out what the fee is?
Well, the best way that I would recommend doing it is based on when the deposit occurs. That's when you would run your sync. And if all of your transactions are coming through the Bloomerang payments, then the difference between what is deposited and the two entries here, if it's 50 bucks, whatever the case may be, then the deposit that comes in from Bloomerang payments would be, what would the number be? 5,025. Okay, yeah, so that. And then the difference is what you would enter in as the fee entry. And it can just be entered in one time. It doesn't have to be one fee entry for Elizabeth Lemon, another fee entry for Michael Scott. You can just have that one offsetting fee entry, and that counts for the entire deposit.
That's right. That's right. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. Now the person, and somebody else had asked this before, what if you have your bank connected, which most of you do? You're going to freak out on this. Okay, so check this out. So what's left here is these other two, 250 and 200. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my bank feed. Here's 450 right here. This one didn't have any fees in it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click Find Match. And what this is going to do is it's going to look for all sales receipts and payments that were entered around this time of that deposit to try and see if it can figure out a match. Okay. So, and let's see. So it looks like we're trying to get to 450, and here's these three, and it matches 450 perfectly. So it's like, okay, this is absolutely perfect. This is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and just click save. So what it's going to do is it's not going to re-enter anything. Okay. It's not going to do that. Instead, what it's going to do, these are suggested matches. I don't think those are actually the matches that we wanted. Okay, here we go. Here's the matches that we wanted. Here's one from Bloomerang, and here's the other one from Bloomerang. It's this one and this one. Okay. So now it's not going to re-enter anything. It's not going to duplicate. All it's going to do is it's going to take 250 out of that money in the drawer. Let me refresh this so that you can see how this works. So it's going to take this 450 out of that money in the drawer, and it's going to add it to the checking account. Okay, let's go back into where this is. Here I am. I'm going to go ahead and save. And now it's removed it from the bank feed. And I'll go over to the chart of accounts. This was at 450. I'm going to refresh the screen. And now it's going to go back down to 0. And now this has gone up. And if you go into the register, actually, to find your 450, let's see if I can find my 450 here. I'll just do it this way. 450. Here's my deposit of 450. When you click on it, you see this one one online bank match. See, this is the one that came downloaded and it's now attached to the transactions that Bloomerang entered. So the way that this would work is that stuff happens in Bloomerang, you sync it, and then you just simply match it to the deposit. If you have to add a fee, you add a fee, and you're good to go. All right. So I think what I want to do, because we're at an hour and a half now, is I want to do one more thing. First of all, I want to shamelessly plug myself. So this is my 3-day webinar series. It's 2 hours a day for 3 days, teaches you everything you need to know about QuickBooks. It's happening the 24th, 25th, and 26th from 2 to 4:30 for desktop users, and May 31st, 1st and 2nd for online users. You put in Bloom 40. If you don't want to learn that way, if you're advanced, you're like, dude, I just want my own course online. We have that also. And there is a, let me go back into QuickBooks Made Easy. If you go to On Demand, we have on-demand courses. Look at this bundle. This is 16 hours of learning. It's online training, streamable. You'll have access to it as soon as you buy it. And it will give you everything you need to know about QuickBooks. This is even more intense than the 3-day webinar series because this is 16 hours of learning. You get it for either online or desktop. It's $4.99 normally, or $3.99 normally. We're going to give you $100 off. It's Bloom 298. And then if you're like, I don't want to do that at all, I just want to talk to you, Greg, and ask questions. We have 3 people that do questions 24 hours, 7 hours, 24/7. We can dial into your software and help you fix stuff. It's called tech support. A year is $4.99. We're giving it to you for $2.99 for a whole year. It's called Bloom TS 299. And to get to that, you go over here, tech support, and sign up there. Okay, now that's it. I will give you the codes again. Bill, just make sure they have the codes. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Cody, for a second, because there is somebody that wanted to show how to add the QuickBooks card to the site, to your Bloomerang. So
okay, sure.
You show that to them, and then we're just going to throw it open for questions for a few more minutes.
All right, so if I reshare, my screen showing up again?
Yes.
All right, so if you don't have QuickBooks enabled, QuickBooks Online enabled, you will not see this card when you go to your settings page. You have to go into My Organization, and then down here, there's Accounting Integration. Choose QuickBooks Online, and don't forget to save. And once you save, when you come back to your settings page, the card will be available, and you click Edit, and you will start with a configuration wizard that goes through kind of the setup and the settings that all get displayed here once you complete that initial setup.
Perfect. All right. So I'm just going to roll through some of these questions here that I'm starting with the chat, and then I'll circle back. Let's see. We already answered that one. Just looking to see. Yeah, they just want to make sure Bloomerang payments, they come in at gross, correct? Or
yes, they are deposited based on this is where my expertise kind of falls short. I'm not the payments person, but I believe that we do that in certain days. Like sometimes I think it's 3 days or 7 days, or you might be able to choose, but it will come in as a bulk deposit minus the fee for that period of time. And then you would use the approach that we showed where you would match them up for that deposit period of time when you sync it over.
So the deposit comes in net of fees, but the sync comes in at gross.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you have that one entry in that Greg showed you how to do.
Okay. So let's see. I got a good question here. How do I know if Bloomerang entered the sales receipt or if it indeed somebody entered it manually in QuickBooks? And that's because the word Bloom is in the number field, right? If you go back into
Yeah,
QuickBooks, we saw the word Bloom.
yeah, it's the I refer to it as the document number. I don't know if it's a reference number or something along those lines,
Just
but we
click
will.
on the sales receipt and you can show them. Yeah, it's because I think they're right there. There you go. Make it bigger. Can you make your screen bigger? Okay.
Is that big enough?
Yeah. Veronica wanted to know how the tribute got there. I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, on Hermione's. So that was when you entered in the transaction to begin with. You would have added the tribute. The tribute is not going to be synced over to QuickBooks. That's just a separate kind of fundraising field like soft credits. When you enter in a transaction, you can put the tribute in. But that's not directly related to the syncing of the transaction over to QuickBooks.
And Miguel wanted to speak about what if, and I had a slide on this, but we didn't get to it, but can a sync be reverted if it was a mistake or needs to be updated? So speak to that real quick.
So once a transaction is synced over to QuickBooks, you can edit it. So let's assume for a moment that because this was synced over, let's say that you know what, it wasn't actually a check, it was cash. So you unlock it, you say method was wrong, and then you can decide how you want to handle this. You can set the status back to unsynced, in which case during the next sync event, it will sync over. Or you can leave the status the same way, in which case you would manually update that information in QuickBooks, which may have already been done. So depending on how you coordinate that information to go back and forth, for the purposes of this, I'm going to say, you know, sync it again.
And if what it does, it just fixes it. It doesn't does it fix it, or it doesn't add it again, it just edits it, right?
Correct. Yeah, we link up to that existing transaction. So if you change the method to cash, you save it here. When you sync it over the next time, it will apply those changes. Now, importantly, if you've updated your rules and you're not doing something that's simple like a single fund to a single rule, it could hit a different rule the next time you sync it through. So you need to make sure that that's kind of how you coordinate with whether you manually update it in QuickBooks or allow it to sync again. But you have both of those options available to you. And once it syncs again, the fields will lock back down and it will stay editable until the sync occurs.
Carrie wanted to know if you can sync to projects as well. Projects are sub-customers. So a project is simply a sub-customer that's been given an additional designation in QuickBooks. So just because you've made something into a project, it's also still a sub-customer. So the answer is yes. Holly wants to know how the sync gets turned on. Is it manual or does it sync automatically? The answer is yes. It can sync automatically or manual. So you want to show where that is?
Sure. Yeah, so you have to set a sync start date as part of your setup. So any transaction whose date is on or after 1/1/2021 is subject to syncing based on the way that we've got this set up. And then you choose whether you want the sync type to be manual or automatic. If you choose automatic, then we allow you to have certain frequencies, which also could include once. So let's say you're going on vacation and you don't want to have to log into Bloomerang to do a manual sync, but you know you're going to do it this Friday, you could do a once. Or if you know that your transactions are going to go and be deposited weekly and you want an automatic sync for that, you can set it up weekly based on the day of the week and a time of day. Even if you set it up for automatic, we will still have the option to do a manual sync if you want to set a manual sync at any moment in time.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't do manual syncs. I wouldn't do automatic syncs. I would do manual. Amy, we divide out our personal donations from our donor advised funds, and we have a custom field for the donor advised fund. Can we differentiate the sync so the donor advised funds go to a foundation contribution category? So if you want donor advised funds to go to a different place than your regular donations, then you're going to need to have either different funds. You can't use a custom field. You're going to have to use one of the fields that are in the rules there, one of those 5 fields he was showing you.
Correct. Yeah, we don't allow custom field filters with QuickBooks Online syncing at this point.
Almost done here. Snee wants to know, can you use the memo in, I don't know what QBS means, to track different events? Can we map the note to the memo in QBS? I guess QBS is QuickBooks. I don't know.
Yeah, currently the note field on the transaction does not map over to the memo. When we first put this together, we didn't want to sync over more things than necessary, because I know that there's some things that can automatically be applied on the QuickBooks side, and we didn't want to mess with the accounting side and how they want to automatically set up things that might go into the memo field, and the same thing with some of the custom fields, because I think there's some limitations on the number of fields that are available to you in QuickBooks. So the note field doesn't go to the memo at this point, and that's not something that you can enable right now. Somebody did mention something about duplicates. I do want to mention one important thing about duplicates. So if a duplicate customer is created during a sync from Bloomerang, the important thing is, do not merge the one that Bloomerang created into the other customer account. Do it in reverse. Make sure that the Bloomerang customer that was created is the one that remains primary. QuickBooks is a little bit weird in their back end for how we can link and stay linked to things. So if you merge the already existing customer into the one that Bloomerang created, it will continue to sync properly. If you merge the Bloomerang one into the one that existed in QuickBooks already, the sync will break for that one, and you would have to get one of our team to do a data service to update that linking.
All right, I'm gonna just kind of flush this out a tiny bit more. Go back into QuickBooks and go to the customer list in QuickBooks if you could. So basically what happens is when you go to sync, Bloomerang's gonna look to see if that customer is already in QuickBooks. And it looks by name, display name, and email address. If you edit one of those, you can edit that one. Click on that and click edit. It's gonna look for, there's the display name, and then it'll look for email address. And I don't know if it picks one over the other, but it tries to find a match that way. If it can't find a match, it creates a new one. Then you come in and you're like, now I've got two Albus Dumbledores. One of them is one that Bloomerang created, and one of them is your old one. The one that Bloomerang created, that's the great one, because that one is already connected to Bloomerang. So you don't want to get rid of that one, which is why you want to merge. You can merge two names into one in QuickBooks. You just change the name of one to the exact same display name as the other one, and it'll merge them. Make sure that you keep the Bloomerang one and change the name of your old one so it matches the Bloomerang one, and then everything is beautiful going forward. Okay, now I'm going to be done. I've got one more thing left. And then I think we're going to finish, but let's see, what was the one person asked a question here that I thought was pretty cool. Well, now I can't find it. Let me look at the questions and see if there's anything in the questions that I still need to answer. There's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of stuff. Okay, does the Bloomerang sync to desktop sync as a sales receipt? I believe it does. How do you know these questions have already been answered?
There was one about, is syncing included with the annual fee? Yes. This integration is part of your Bloomerang subscription. So that is included. There's no additional fee to sync over to QuickBooks Online.
So Nancy says we have 10 product services and 75 classes. Does that mean we need to have 750 rules? Because if each of those product services could conceivably go to each of those 75 classes, then theoretically, I guess yes.
Yeah, if you have to have a different rule for where it syncs over for each combination of the service item and class, then you may need to have separate rules for each one. Now, if Fund 1 with Appeal 1 and Fund 1 with Appeal 2, if both of those go to the same service item and class combination or service item, then you would only need to have the one rule for both of them, because you could map it to the same. You can have multiple ones as long as all of the criteria for the rule meets multiple transactions, then it can go to that one area in QuickBooks, whatever you map it to. But if you have to have a different combination for literally each one, then you might have to have separate rules for them.
Yeah, this is she gets into the really wonky part of this, because if you had one rule that didn't have a rule, that only had a product service answer, like the rule said, if the fund is this, make it go to this product service. And then about 10 rules down, you had a rule that said, if the appeal is this, then go to this class. Would it follow both of those rules?
No, it would follow only the rule that met the first criteria.
Ah, okay. So then you might have to have 750 rules, Nancy. But Cody can fix that. Cody can do that for you this evening. All right. So I think we're going to be done. What do y'all think? I want one word in the chat. There's still over 100 people here, by the way. One rule in the chat about how you feel now. One word. Happy, sad, excited. Who's going to come see me on the webinar in May? I hope that you guys do. I have a simple question. How do I handle indirect costs in my grants? How much does the support for these questions cost me? Tech support would do that, Monica. We can talk to you about that. Anyway, cool. So I've got a lot of exciting things. Okay. Well, Cody, I had a blast. I'm going to go ahead.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no, totally.
Greg was the inspiration for a lot of what we ended up building. So I feel very lucky to have had you with us. So I really appreciate it. Yeah,
no, and you're by far the coolest one that I've worked with on these things. So, and I'm very excited about the partnership with Bloomerang that we're building. So Diana, did you want to say anything on the back end before we take us out?
Thank you again so much, Greg and Cody. Even I always learn something new. So I enjoy sitting back and listening to other presenters on Bloomerang Academy. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you everyone for all of your wonderful, wonderful questions. We love it when you all ask questions. So thank you for being engaged throughout today's presentation. We are going to send out the link to the recording and the slides. So these upcoming classes that Greg has shown you, they're going to be in there as well with the links. So don't be worried about trying to copy all the links now. We'll send those out as well.